The year was 1909, and Belfast's Harland and Wolff shipyard felt like the center of the world. The air rang with the sharp clang of metal, the heavy thud of hammers, and the rumbling of machinery that never truly slept. Thousands of workers moved across the shipyard like a determined army, each man with a role and each role with purpose. Standing among them was Thomas Andrews, a quiet but brilliant naval architect, the man who carried the Titanic's blueprints in his hands and the Titanic's weight in his heart. The White Star Line had demanded a ship like no other, larger, stronger, more luxurious, and more modern than anything that had sailed before. Titanic was not only a vessel, it was a statement. It represented mankind's belief that progress had no limit. Andrews walked through the steel skeleton that towered above him, imagining the decks that would soon shine with polished wood, the grand staircase he had designed with intricate detail, and the enormous engines that would carry more than 2,000 souls across the Atlantic. Every day the ship grew. Giant cranes swung steel plates through the air, riveters pressed red-hot metal into place, sparks flying like fireflies. The shipyard smelled of smoke, hot iron, and the sweat of men who worked through blistering days and freezing mornings. Many workers barely made enough to survive, but being part of the Titanic meant being part of something that would outlive them all. Fathers told their children, "I helped build her," and those children stared at the rising giant with pride. As winter settled on Belfast, snow drifted lightly through the open spaces of the shipyard. Andrews stood at the bow, staring forward at the world that lay beyond the workshop walls. To him, the Titanic was more than a project. It was a dream made of steel and human ambition. He traced his hand over the cold metal, imagining the ship slicing through dark waters, carrying hopes, stories, and a promise of safety unlike anything known before. But not everyone shared that confidence. Older workers whispered warnings in the corners of the yard. They had spent their lives at sea or building ships for those who did. They knew the ocean's mood could change like a heartbeat. "No ship is unsinkable," one muttered as he hammered a final bolt into place. His voice was lost in the noise of progress, drowned out by the sound of a world eager to believe in perfection. The newspapers called Titanic a miracle. The public called it a floating palace. The world called it unsinkable. No one wanted to imagine danger, doubt, or failure. The Titanic became a symbol of human dominance over nature. Yet deep within the steel plates, hidden behind the pride and optimism, lay an unspoken truth: the sea always has the final word. Part 2 to 500 words. By May 1911, the Titanic was ready to taste the water. After years of backbreaking labor, careful design, and unshakable determination, the ship stood complete, nearly 900 feet of steel marble, towering above the River Lagan. When the day of the launch arrived, more than 100,000 people gathered along the riverbanks to witness history. Families shouted, children pointed in awe, and workers who had given their strength to the ship wiped tears as they saw their creation gleaming under the pale sky. As the giant ship slid into the water with a controlled, graceful descent, the crowd erupted into cheers. It was not just a vessel, it was a victory. The workers celebrated with pride, knowing their fingerprints were hidden in every beam and every rivet. Once afloat, Titanic was moved to the fitting-out basin where her true transformation began. For months, carpenters polished expensive wood brought from around the world. Artists carved elegant details into the grand staircase and dining saloons. Electricians wired hundreds of lamps that would glow warmly across the decks. The ship grew into a floating palace with Turkish baths, luxurious cabins, smoking rooms, libraries, and enormous boilers. Even third-class accommodations were better than many homes on land. Thomas Andrews walked the finished corridors, admiring every detail he had once imagined. The rich scent of varnished wood filled the air. Light bounced off brass railings. It felt less like a ship and more like a world. Andrews felt pride but also an unspoken sense of responsibility. He knew every corner of this ship, every strength, and every limitation. By April 1912, Titanic sailed to Southampton, ready for its maiden voyage. The harbor buzzed with excitement. Families, travelers, and dreamers arrived with trunks piled high. First-class passengers came dressed in their finest, expecting royal treatment. They marveled at the chandeliers, the shining floors, the elegance that greeted them at every turn. Third-class families boarded with hope in their eyes, grateful to be traveling on a ship so large and safe that newspapers claimed no storm could break it. Captain Edward Smith, a calm and seasoned sailor, stood proudly on the bridge. He had commanded many ships, but none like this one. "She is ready," he declared. And with that, Titanic's great engines roared to life. Smoke curled into the sky as the ship pulled away from Southampton, gliding across the water like a steel castle on the move. People on the docks waved and shouted farewell. Passengers leaned over the rails, smiling, excited, unaware of the fate that would later turn this moment into a tragic memory. At that time, everything felt perfect. The world believed in the Titanic. The world believed in the dream of an unsinkable ship. And with that belief, the Titanic's legend began its journey toward history. A massive steel framework of the RMS Titanic rising in the Harland and Wolff shipyard, 1909 Belfast, thousands of workers in flat caps and heavy clothing, towering cranes lifting huge steel plates, glowing rivets flying through the air, industrial smoke, cold winter lighting, cinematic realism, ultra-detailed textures, dramatic shadows, early 20th century atmosphere. 2. Thomas Andrews inspecting the Titanic's skeleton. Chief architect Thomas Andrews standing beneath the enormous steel ribs of the half-built Titanic, holding rolled blueprints, sparks from riveters illuminating the dark understructure, workers on scaffolding, steam and smoke swirling, snow lightly falling, realistic Victorian-era clothing, emotional, dramatic, hyper-detailed historical scene. Part 2 Image prompts 2 prompts. 3. Titanic launch day, 1911, crowd at River Lagan. Over 100,000 spectators gathered along the River Lagan for the Titanic launch, the enormous finished hull sliding into the water. Cheering crowds, waving handkerchiefs, workers with pride in their eyes, steam rising around the ship, bright daylight, vivid realism, high-resolution historical accuracy, epic scale. 4. Grand interiors of Titanic during fitting out. Luxurious Titanic interior during 1911 fitting out stage. Carpenters polishing rich wood paneling. Ornate carved details on the grand staircase. Electricians installing lamps. Soft warm lighting reflecting on brass railings. Workers in early 1900s uniforms. Cinematic composition. Ultra-realistic, lavish detail, historical atmosphere.